Hi, fantasy fiction fans, and welcome to Myth and Magic, a fantasy writer's kit bag. I'm fantasy writer Neil Mack, the author of Moondog and the Reed Leopard, and I want to share my love of folklore, local history and nature mythology with writers and creatives like you on my regular podcasts. It's designed with fellow indie publishers and writers in mind, but all fans of fantasy fiction are very welcome to join in. In my fantasy writer's kit bag, writers, artists and creatives will find lots of ideas and discussion about things such as potions, dark arts, fabulous creatures, folktale studies, nature lore, and the interesting history behind the myth and magic that underpins our understanding of the fictional universe. Have you ever heard of the 13 treasures of island Britain? Because that's what I want to talk about this week. Now, it's remembered in a medieval tradition, which was an oral tradition, and some early texts which were updated in around about the 15th century. The treasures in Welsh are called the Tulws, T-L-W-S, Tulws, included such things as useful utensils, for food and drink, for example, cauldrons and horns, weaponry, which would include swords, transport, which would include things to do with horses, clothing, which would include things like coats, and other magical items, which would include things like stones and rings. That's what the treasures are. But what are the 13 treasures of island Britain? I want to go through them with you today. Number 1. White hilt, the sword of generosity. Now, if a good man drew white hilt from the scabbard, the sword would burst into flame from hilt to tip. And if the bearer was unworthy, the fire would burn him. So obviously it would be very sensible, if you were an unworthy person, not to choose the sword of generosity as your sword. Not very many people would like to carry it, but the ones who did were the good men, and when they drew it, it burst into flame. Number 2, the bottomless hamper of the sunken kingdom. So this hamper, which was also described as a basket, would be used for expeditions, perhaps for hunts, and also to go into battle. Food for one man would be put inside the bottomless hamper, but when it was opened, inside were food for 100 men, so very useful basket. Number 3, the horn of Bran. Now this isn't Bran from the Game of Thrones series, it's another Bran. And the horn of Bran in the 13 Treasures of Island Britain is a drinking horn. And whatever drink was wished for, so you'd have to, it's a bit like the thinking hat. If you thought of a drink, then that drink was found inside the horn of Bran. Number 4, the chariot of Morgan. Now, if you used this chariot, it would be a very amazing and magical piece of transport, because it would always reach whatever destination you wanted to go to. That would be nice, wouldn't it? The halter of Edyn. And Edyn is spelt E-I-D-Y-N, and it's the word which forms the part of the construct of Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland. The halter is used to actually move a horse around, and the halter of Edyn is this: overnight, whatever horse you wished would be in the halter, by morning that actual horse would be there for your use. So this would be quite useful. You hang your halter outside your bedchamber, or perhaps even better, outside in the stable yard. And in the morning, the horse that you wanted, maybe it might be a fantastically fast charger, or it might be a big heavy horse to carry equipment, or it might be somebody else's horse, a horse that belongs to your rival. That horse would be in the halter. Number 6, the knife of bearded sorrow. It does sound quite bad, this, but it's actually very useful and quite a nice thing to have, because the knife of bearded sorrow, everybody in medieval times and before carried a knife, but not to kill people, it was to cut meat. And this knife would serve 24 men at the same sitting with any food that they desired. Number 7, the choosing cauldron of the giant. Now the choosing cauldron was quite useful, a bit like a sorting hat. It would not boil meat for a coward, but it would boil meat quickly for a brave man. So it was useful to use the choosing cauldron of the giant, and it used to belong to a giant, so it was obviously a very big cauldron and could serve a lot of men at once. And the king or the lord or the brave knight could choose which men to take into battle with him the following day, because he knew that the meat would not be boiled for a coward, but would boil quickly for the brave men. Number 8, the whetstone of Altclut, and Altclut is spelt Altclut. If a brave man sharpened his sword on the whetstone of Altclut, so a whetstone is a type of very, very fine, smooth stone which you would actually sharpen blades on. If a brave man sharpened his sword on the whetstone of Altclut, then the sword would certainly kill any man from whom it drew blood. So you wouldn't even have to score a direct hit on somebody, just cut them a little bit and they would die. But if a cowardly man used the whetstone, his sword would refuse to draw any blood at all. So once again, it's a good way to choose your men before a battle. The scarlet robe of Padarn, Padarn, is number 9. If a well-born man, a goodly man, put this coat on, it would be exactly the right size for him, which is quite handy. So that would be useful if you ever went to Primark to do your clothes shopping and you found the scarlet robe of Padarn, because it would certainly fit you. However, according to legend, it would never fit a churl, which I suppose is a less worthy person. Number 10 and number 11 are together, and it's the crock and the dish of the cleric. Whatever food you wished for would be found in the crock and or the dish. So number 10 and number 11 join together, the crock and dish of the cleric. And number 12 is the chessboard of Arthurette, which has probably got obviously some connection with King Arthur of legend, is a small village up north of England. Anyway, the chessboard of Arthurette is said to be a chessboard where the chess pieces play themselves, so they don't need a human involvement. So very early computer simulation, I suppose. And it's said that the board was made out of gold and the chessmen were made out of silver. And number 13, the last one, is the mantle of Cornish Arthur. And this certainly is belonging to the King Arthur. And there's a King Arthur of Wales and there's a King Arthur of Cornwall. And this is the mantle of Cornish Arthur. It's a cloak of invisibility, and it said that whoever hid under it could not be seen, but that person could see everyone else. There are the 13 treasures of Island Britain. Celestial skyfish. A couple of years ago I went to an amazingly spooky place called Moira Furnace, and I went there whilst I was writing my first book in the Moondog trilogy. I wanted to see it for myself, and it's a place where a lot of spooky haunted activity goes on, and there are a lot of ghost searching groups which go there, and they take a lot of video footage, and they go there and experience and experiment. But recently when they went there, a huge celestial skyfish flew out and flew across in front of one of the paranormal researchers, and they took a picture of it. And I've been thinking about these mysterious things, and they're also known scientifically as the mysterious flying rods, RODS. So I just wanted to fill you in on those. Are spooky flying rods captured on film some type of temporal or transcendental celestial skyfish? Or are they an alien life form? Or are they even an undiscovered species? Or is there a more prosaic explanation? So on my show notes I'll try to put some pictures of them for you. These flying rods are elongated visual artifacts that materialise in nighttime photographic images, and especially in nighttime video recordings. Now, it appears to be a fairly recent phenomena, so this perhaps suggests that recent technological advances, for example, everybody's got a movie camera on their phone nowadays, many of those can take reasonably good nighttime pictures. Lots of people have got very good digital photography, and they can take pictures in very low light. So it's possible that because we know it's a recent phenomenon, that recent technical advances have improved the documentation of these manifestations, although they possibly would have been there always, but we've only just seen them. Some advocates of the paranormal, for example the haunting ghost groups which go to the Moira furnace, have claimed that what you're actually seeing are alien life forms. Other people have suggested that they are perhaps extra-dimensional creatures and they're just flitting into our dimension and then flitting out again. And UFO people or ufologists are suggesting that they are small UFOs. Whatever they are, they seem to be alive, they seem to be flying animals, and they seem to be thin and silver and transient with slender, elongated bodies and multiple wings. And they're said by the people who've seen them to be evasive and super fast. They just flick across in front of you and that's it. Some pseudoscientists have claimed that these life forms have been depicted in petroglyphs, and petroglyphs are rock carvings that are found throughout the world, which might suggest that prehistoric people could see these cryptids without using any technology, and they wanted to record the experience of seeing these super fast, extra-dimensional, thin silver creatures. But there's not a lot of evidence for that, and if you look at the petroglyphs that the pseudoscientists are talking about, it could easily also be several men in a boat or a way of counting off some numbers on a stick. But anyway, so far as we know, this is everything we know about these flying rods. Number one, flying rods can't be seen with the naked eye. Number two, flying rods seem to happen at night. Number three, flying rods appear best when they're captured by video. Number four, flying rods are the most obvious when they're captured with infrared film. Number five, flying rods become discernible when using slow shutter speeds on the camera. And number six, flying rods are found in spooky places such as cemeteries, old churches or ruins. So you have to ask yourself this: what type of creature flies at night, because it flies, becomes discernible at slow shutter speeds, and haunts, and I'm putting that in scare quotes, haunts spooky places? Investigators have established that the most likely explanation for these amazing flying rods is that they are visual illusions produced onto film by nocturnal flying moths, M-O-T-H-S, moths. Because obviously moths come out at night and they tend to flicker and flitter around, and they obviously do haunt spooky places, don't they? The rapid passage of an insect while it flaps its wings across the scope of a lens is suspected to produce a wand-like visual effect, and this is due to motion blur, or it's also known as apparent streaking. Generally, energetic animals such as moths produce elongated after-image trails, photographers call it, when the flaps of their wings are captured on film. The rapid flapping of the wings creates the illusion of these jutting extrusions that you see on the spinal column of the silver flying creature. And the reason it's silver is because it's just caught in the light for that moment. And in fact, actually, it's quite comparatively simple to capture your own flying rod photographs for yourself. Because if you photograph a cloud of flying insects caught in a glint of sun, and you use a reasonably long exposure, and you can do this in the day, you will find that some insects will be in focus while others will not. But if you look at all of the insects, you will see that when an insect flies sideways to the lens, it will appear like an elongated flying rod, just like the flying rods in the picture from Moira Furnace. So, what are mysterious flying rods? Are they celestial skyfish? The jury is still out, but they could be photographs of moths. Fabulous creature of the week, the Fir Bolg. In medieval Irish myth, the Fir Bolg, spelt Firbolg, or sometimes Firbholg, are the fourth group of people to settle in the island of Ireland. They are descended from the Muintir Nemit, which was an earlier group who abandoned Ireland and went to different parts of Europe. Those few who went to Greece, who escaped to Greece, became the Fir Bolg and eventually returned to the now uninhabited Ireland and started to settle there. And in the Book of Invasions, which is an 11th century compilation of Irish language and poems and beautiful prose narratives that tell the history of Erin, which is the ancient word for Ireland, the first three settlers of Ireland were the people of Cessair, the people of Porthalon, and the people of Nemed. But these were all either wiped out or forced to abandon the island. And a handful of these, like I said, these early people, they fled to Greece and became the Fir Bolg. And Fir Bolg means men of bags. And it's thought that it's because they took their bags with them, but there are other explanations for why they're called the men of bags. The narrators of this original tale in the Book of Invasions probably intended to provide an epic origin story for the Irish folk. And they wanted, I think, to compare their own ancient tribal history to that of the Israelites, who, as you remember, were taken away into slavery and then had to return to their promised land. But many academics have suggested that the Fir Bolg are in truth a supernatural race of Fomorians, Fomorians. So what are Fomorians? Well, the Fomorians are said to have been semi-gods who represented the harmful and the destructive powers of nature. So they were the personifications, if you like, of chaos and of darkness and of death and of blight and of drought. It's understandable why local peoples thought that the Viking sea raiders that they came across were indeed these Fomorians, because the Viking sea raiders that occasionally attacked coastal towns all around the island became and were known to be malevolent spirits in themselves, and they came from the sea. In fact, the folklore of Ireland suggests that they came from under the waves. The Vikings and the Fomorians dwelt under the waves, and they brought with them chaos, and they brought with them darkness, and they brought with them death and blight. In the Irish mythology, it's said that the first men on Ireland descended from Ham, and Ham was the son of Noah, and they arrived in Erin, or Ham arrived in Erin, just after the Great Flood, Noah's flood from the Holy Bible. But when Ham arrived, he found that the Fomorians were already there. Now that's a bit odd, isn't it? So the Fomorians can be associated with the Vikings, and they were already there. The Fomorians were hostile, and they were monstrous beings, half giant and half sea raider, which makes us think that possibly there's a Viking connection. If the Fomorians were indeed immortal, it might explain how they were able to survive and then transmute themselves into the later race of supermen that we know of as the Fir Bolg. And so therefore, if they are eternal and they're demigods, it's also suggested that the Fir Bolg might still be with us today. Though generally it's a held consensus amongst historians that the Fir Bolg were a folk memory of an earlier group of Celts who possibly were sea-born people, and they were called the Bolgi. And of course Bolgae, which is a Roman Latin word, could be a root for Fir Bolg. But that's who the Fir Bolg were.